No one in Woodbury Meadows could have possibly imagined that Charles Hartman, a quiet man with a slouched back and oil-stained hands, would be the one to crack a mechanical riddle that had left every certified mechanic in the entire county scratching their heads in frustration. Charles lived in a weather-beaten trailer at the far end of the park with his teenage daughter, Amelia, and his life was a daily exercise in survival. Each day began with hope and ended with quiet exhaustion. He was just barely managing to hold their fragile world together. Then came the day everything changed. It was a chilly, overcast morning when a sleek, luxury car came to an unexpected halt just a few yards from his home. The vehicle, clearly out of place on the cracked and weary road, had broken down. Its driver, Audrey Woodward, dressed in expensive fabrics and frustration, stood beside it, helpless and stranded. Charles, armed with little more than a box of basic tools and a mind full of forgotten brilliance, stepped in. He didn't just repair the intricate engine of that prototype vehicle, a marvel of modern engineering and cutting-edge innovation. He enhanced it. With no official certifications, no fancy garage, and no access to advanced diagnostics, Charles did what no one else could. He breathed life into a machine even its own creators hadn't yet fully understood. The next morning, something extraordinary happened. A loud, whirring sound filled the air as the residents of Woodbury Meadows looked up in disbelief. A helicopter, a real one, descended from the sky and landed right outside Charles's modest trailer. Stepping out was Pamela Woodward, CEO of a global technology empire and Audrey's mother. That single event turned their quiet neighborhood into the epicenter of a story that would ripple far beyond the rusted trailers and pothole-filled roads. But let's pause right there. Before we dive deeper into this story of hidden genius and second chances, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you've been moved by stories like this, make sure to subscribe, because what happens next, it'll stay with you long after the credits roll. The morning sun broke through thick, low-hanging clouds, casting a golden-orange light that spilled across the trailer park. Long shadows stretched over patches of unmowed grass and oil-streaked driveways. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the unmistakable bite of motor oil, wrapping around the rows of faded mobile homes like a quiet reminder of where dreams often go to hibernate. Charles Hartman, 42, crouched beside an aging Chevy pickup, his spine curved from years of heavy lifting and hard labor. His fingers, weathered, thick with calluses, moved with methodical precision as he replaced a failing alternator. Sweat gathered on his brow despite the coolness of the morning, trickling down the side of his face, disappearing into the collar of his faded blue work shirt. The name stitched onto it, Charlie, was nearly invisible from years of grease and countless washes. This particular truck belonged to Mrs. Peterson, a 75-year-old widow who lived just a few lots down. She didn't have much to offer in terms of payment, mostly home-cooked meals and occasional small bills, but Charles never said no. "Almost done, Mrs. Peterson," he called, his voice low and gravelly. The elderly woman stood on her tiny wooden porch, holding a thermos in both hands. "You're a godsend, Charlie," she said with a warm, grateful smile. "Don't know what I'd do without you." Charles offered a quiet nod as he tightened the final bolt and gently closed the hood. His deep-set eyes, still a striking shade of blue despite the exhaustion that surrounded them, carried the weight of a man who'd lived through more loss than anyone deserved. He wiped his hands on a rag that had once been white, but now bore the stories of 100 engines and twice as many hard days. "Let's give it a try," he said, sliding into the driver's seat. The engine sprang to life on the first try, humming smoothly like a younger version of itself. Mrs. Peterson clapped her hands in delight. She shuffled forward and handed Charles the thermos, along with a crumpled $20 bill. "Fresh coffee, and I insist you take this." "That's too much," Charles protested, already trying to hand it back. "Nonsense," she replied with a shake of her head. "Warren Schmidt at the garage would have charged me 100. You're too good for your own good, Charlie Hartman." With a reluctant nod, Charles slipped the money into his pocket. $20 wouldn't change his life, but it would fill his gas tank for the week, and right now, that was everything. As he packed up his tools, his phone buzzed, a text from Amelia. "Dad, don't forget I need the registration fee for the science competition by tomorrow." $50. Sorry. Charles stared at the message, his jaw clenched. $50 he didn't have. But Amelia's competitions weren't optional. They were her ticket out of this life. A future he'd once promised her mother, Sarah, before cancer took her from them far too soon. "You all right, Charlie?" Mrs. Peterson asked softly, noticing his expression. He forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach his tired eyes. "Yeah, just fine." The walk back home took less than 5 minutes. Woodbury Meadows wasn't large, just a small patchwork of trailers along cracked asphalt lanes. His own trailer sat quietly at the end of Willow Lane, marked by a small vegetable garden Amelia had started last spring and a makeshift workshop Charles had assembled from salvaged parts and a tarp. Inside, the trailer was simple but clean. Every surface bore signs of wear, but also care. A wall of old photographs whispered stories of a different life. Charles in a cap and gown, standing proudly next to a prototype engine. Charles and Sarah smiling on their wedding day, baby Amelia sleeping in her mother's arms. All frozen memories of a life before the storms came. The kitchen table was buried in papers, bills stamped final notice, a letter about a rent hike, unanswered job applications. Charles swept them into a drawer just as a knock came at the door. It was Benjamin Lopez, his neighbour. "Charlie," he said, stepping up, concern in his voice. "Tom Parker's making rounds again. Says he's starting evictions next week. Anyone 2 months behind is getting the boot." Charles's stomach dropped. "Thanks for the heads up, Ben." "How far behind are you?" 6 weeks, Charles admitted. "But I've got some jobs lined up. Should be able to give him something by Friday." Benjamin hesitated, then offered, "I could spot you. Got some overtime at the plant." Charles cut him off gently. "We'll be okay, but thank you." When Benjamin left, Charles sat down and began dialing numbers, desperate for work. 3 rejections later, he finally got a bite. A farmer on the outskirts needed his tractor repaired. The pay was low, but enough to cover Amelia's registration fee. That was enough. Soon, the school bus pulled up and Amelia appeared, her energy shining even after a long day. Her brown hair was tied back, her backpack slung lazily over one shoulder. "Dad!" she called out excitedly. "Mrs. Foster said my project on fuel efficiency could make the state finals, and if I win, there's a scholarship for the Brighton University program." Charles's heart swelled. His girl, brilliant, determined, and full of promise. "That's amazing, sweetheart," he said, pride making his voice softer. "And don't worry about the fee, it's taken care of." She hesitated. "You didn't take another payday loan, did you?" "No," he assured her. "I fixed Mrs. Peterson's truck today, and I've got a tractor job tonight." "I'll come help," Amelia offered. "Dinner first," he said. "Then we'll see." They ate spaghetti with jarred sauce, Amelia taking a smaller portion, stretching the food. Charles noticed, and it broke his heart. After dinner, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned amber, Charles loaded his tools into his old truck, the check engine light glowing like a warning he couldn't afford to heed. As he pulled onto the main road, he passed a black hybrid vehicle stalled on the side. Normally he'd have kept going, but something, maybe Sarah's voice in the back of his mind, made him stop. A young woman stood outside the car, Audrey Woodward, frustrated, alone. She'd called every mechanic in town with no luck. Charles stepped out, introduced himself, and without knowing it, took the first step toward changing everything. Audrey's eyes widened, her face shifting from visible relief to a spark of astonishment, her curiosity igniting like a flame. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, yet heavy with awe. "Charles Hartman," he replied with quiet honesty. But there was something unspoken in his tone, something that said this man was far more than just a small-town mechanic. Anyone could see that fixing a high-tech prototype like hers wasn't just luck or skill, it was genius. Not only had he repaired her vehicle, he'd improved it. Under her probing gaze, Charles instinctively looked away, his shoulders tensing. He suddenly felt exposed, as though she could see right through him. "Just someone who's good with engines," he mumbled, beginning to gather his tools, retreating into the modesty that had become second nature over the years. "How much do I owe you?" Audrey asked, reaching for her purse. "Nothing," he said flatly, already closing the truck bed. "Glad I could help." "Wait," she called after him, fumbling with her wallet. "At least let me pay you for your time." Charles froze. The truth was, he desperately needed the money. He had already lost the tractor job, and with that, the chance to cover Amelia's upcoming registration fee. Every dollar mattered. But something inside him, something stubborn and principled, resisted. That repair hadn't been just another job. It had felt different, like a whisper from his past, reminding him of who he used to be. Audrey, catching the subtle shift in his expression, softened her approach. "How about this?" she offered gently. "My mother's company is always on the lookout for engineers and mechanics with real talent. Let me give her your name." Charles chuckled, but there was no humour in it, only a bitter trace of disappointment. "I already applied to Woodward Technologies," he admitted. "Got rejected." Her eyebrows arched in surprise. "You applied as a mechanic?" "As an engineer," he corrected, his voice quiet but steady. "A long time ago. That's what I was." Recognition lit Audrey's eyes like dawn breaking over a mountaintop. "And now you're fixing cars in a small town," she murmured, more observation than judgment. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, pressing it into his grease-stained hand. "Call this number tomorrow. It's my direct line. I want to hear more about the design flaw you found." Charles accepted the card with a sigh of skepticism. People like Audrey, well-meaning, privileged, full of good intentions, often made promises in moments like these. But once they returned to their world of boardrooms and luxury, those promises faded like smoke in the wind. "Drive safe," he said simply, climbing into his beat-up truck. "If the car acts up again, I live in the Woodbury Meadows trailer park. Last unit on Willow Lane." As he drove away, Charles glanced in the rearview mirror. Audrey stood in the soft glow of her headlights, watching him go, her phone already lifted to her ear. He had no idea what conversation she was beginning, or the chain of events she was about to set into motion. The tractor job was officially gone. He'd called the farmer to explain why he was late, but someone else had already taken the gig. That meant no money for Amelia's registration, at least not yet. As the engine hummed quietly beneath him, the weight of life's burdens slowly crept back onto his shoulders, dulling the brief euphoria he'd felt working on something that had challenged his mind. For those fleeting minutes, he hadn't been Charles, the struggling single father. He hadn't been the man scraping by doing odd jobs, or the forgotten ex-professional. No, for that short time, he'd been Charles Hartman, the engineer, the man who once dreamed big, the man who once believed. When he got home, Amelia was already asleep. Her handwritten science project notes sprawled across the worn kitchen table. Charles stood in the doorway of her tiny bedroom, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. The weight of a promise whispered years ago echoed in his heart. "I'm trying, Sarah," he said softly into the darkness. "I'm still trying." He placed the crumpled $20 bill from Mrs. Peterson beside Amelia's textbooks, barely enough, but maybe a step closer. Too tired even to shower off the day's grime, he unfolded the lumpy couch that doubled as his bed and lay down. Sleep took him quickly. He had no way of knowing that. Across town, in the grandest suite Woodbury's only luxury hotel had to offer, Audrey Woodward was on a video call with her mother, animatedly recounting the incredible mechanic who had not only fixed her cutting-edge prototype, but enhanced its performance using nothing more than intuition and basic tools. And he certainly couldn't have known that Pamela Woodward, the formidable CEO of Woodward Technologies and one of the most powerful women in the automotive world, was already instructing her assistant to dig up everything on a certain Charles Hartman of Woodbury, with particular attention to his engineering credentials and any past patents. By the time the sun would rise again, Charles's life, steeped in hardship and weighed down by years of disappointment, was about to shift in a way he could never have imagined. The pale light of dawn crept through the threadbare curtains of the trailer. Charles stirred on the aging sofa, his back aching in protest. For a moment, he lay still, his mind already running the day's numbers, how much he needed to scrape together, which odd jobs he might land, and whether he could risk letting the truck's engine light go one more day without attention. Then, a soft knock at the door. He glanced at the clock, 5:47 a.m., too early for casual visits. He threw on a t-shirt and shuffled to the door. On the porch stood Benjamin Lopez, dressed for work, nervously clutching his cap. "Charlie, you need to come see this." Ben said, almost whispering. "There's a woman asking for you at the park entrance. One of those upscale SUVs, with a driver and everything." Charles frowned, dragging a hand through his sleep-tousled hair. What woman? Didn't catch her name, but she looked important, wearing a suit that probably costs more than everything I own. And then it clicked. Audrey Woodward? Benjamin shrugged. Could be. She said it's urgent. Charles nodded slowly, already heading back inside to change. Tell her I'll be right there. 5 minutes later, he was walking briskly toward the park entrance page, aware of curious neighbours peeking through blinds. The SUV, black, sleek, immaculate, looked like a spaceship among the rusted pickups and aging sedans of Woodbury Meadows. The back door opened, but it wasn't Audrey who stepped out. It was an older woman, early 50s, with silver hair styled into a sharp bob. Her features were angular, refined, and commanding. The tailored charcoal suit she wore matched her presence, powerful and unapologetic. She extended a hand. "Mr. Hartman, Pamela Woodward, I believe you met my daughter last night." Charles shook her hand, keenly aware of the oil under his fingernails. "Yes, ma'am. Her car broke down." "And you fixed it," she said, appraising him with quiet intensity. "May we speak in private? I believe I have a proposition you'll want to hear." Charles hesitated, glancing back at the trailer. "My daughter's still asleep. I don't like leaving her alone." Pamela nodded with respect. "Understandable. Perhaps there's a cafe nearby? The Rise and Shine opens at 6, just down the road. I can meet you there." At the diner, only a couple of early factory workers sat hunched over coffee. Judy, the owner, did a double take when Pamela stepped in. Her presence was like a gust of city wind in a quiet country room. "Coffee, Charlie?" Judy called out. "For both of us. Black," Charles replied. Pamela slid into a booth, and once the waitress had retreated, she opened a leather folder. "My daughter was thoroughly impressed last night," she began. "Fixing the Pulse prototype wasn't easy. Improving it, well, our team has been struggling with that for months." Charles shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't that complicated. "The thermal regulator was overheating due to a faulty design," Pamela added. "Audrey mentioned you rerouted part of the electrical framework." Charles nodded. "Just a small adjustment." Pamela studied him. "You applied to Woodward Technologies 8 months ago, as an engineer." "Got rejected," he said, "like a lot of things in my life lately." "I believe that was a mistake," she said plainly. "You were part of Davidson Automotive. You developed patents for hybrid engines, patents that mysteriously advanced the company after your departure." His fingers tightened around the mug. "Those days are long gone. Because they stole your work," she said quietly. "And when you tried to fight back, they destroyed your career." Charles looked away, pain flashing in his eyes. "My wife was diagnosed with cancer during the lawsuit. I dropped everything to care for her, took their settlement. It bought us time. Not much, but enough." "I'm sorry," she said gently. He nodded. "After Sarah died, I tried to come back, but Davidson had blacklisted me. So I did what I had to do." Pamela leaned in. "Then let me offer you a chance to come back." She slid a contract toward him. "Director of Innovation, full benefits, relocation, a future for you and your daughter." Charles stared at the paper. It felt like a dream. "Why?" he asked. "Why offer this to a man you just met?" "I'm not offering it to a man I just met," Pamela said, her gaze unwavering. "I'm offering it to the man I should have hired 8 months ago." "I'm extending this offer," Pamela began, her voice steady but layered with reverence, "to the engineer who didn't just tweak thermal systems. He redefined them. The same man who still holds 3 active patents Davidson relies on to this day. The one who, with nothing more than hand tools and an uncanny instinct, enhanced my prototype like it was second nature." She paused, the edges of her lips curling in a knowing smile. "And honestly," she added with a glint of amusement, "I've always taken a bit of pleasure in poaching brilliance right from under Edward Davidson's nose. Call it corporate karma." Charles took a thoughtful sip of his coffee, using the pause to steady the whirlwind of emotions rushing through him. The moment felt almost surreal, like fiction bleeding into reality. A perfect solution materializing from thin air, just as everything seemed to teeter on the edge. A deus ex machina in the flesh. "I'd need time to think," he said cautiously, anchoring himself in reason. "Amelia, she'd need to be on board. Brighton Heights is far from everything she knows." "Of course," Pamela nodded, ever prepared. She reached into her sleek portfolio and pulled out a formal envelope. Here's the official offer. Details, benefits, everything spelled out. No pressure. You've got until the end of the week. Then, with a glance at her watch, her tone shifted. That said, there's something else I'd like to show you, something that's best demonstrated in person. Is there a place nearby with a clear view of your trailer? Charles raised an eyebrow, confused by the odd request. There's the community field just behind the park. But why? You'll see, Pamela answered cryptically, her smile unreadable. Shall we? The drive back to Woodbury Meadows was quiet, but Charles's mind was anything but. Possibilities he had long buried under years of exhaustion and disappointment now clawed their way to the surface. As they pulled into the dusty lot, the trailer park had come alive, neighbours heading to jobs, children trudging towards school. Curious eyes followed the sleek black SUV that trailed behind Charles's rusted pickup. As they parked, Charles spotted Amelia standing outside their trailer, still in her pyjamas, confusion etched across her face as she stared at her phone. The moment she caught sight of him, she hurried over, voice tinged with worry. Dad, where were you? I woke up and you were gone. Then I got this weird message, something about a full scholarship to the Brighton Summer Engineering Programme. Her words trailed off as she noticed Pamela stepping out of the SUV. Who's that? Amelia, Charles said gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. This is Ms. Woodward. She's the CEO of Woodward Technologies. Pamela extended a hand, warm and charismatic. It's lovely to meet you, Amelia. Your father is an incredibly talented engineer, and I've heard you might be following in his footsteps. Amelia, eyes wide, shook her hand. Yes, ma'am. I'm working on a project about alternative fuel efficiency for the State Science Fair. I'd love to hear more, perhaps during your time at the Brighton programme, Pamela said smoothly, watching Amelia's mouth fall open in stunned disbelief. You're the one who sent the scholarship? But why? Charles intervened, voice calm. Ms. Woodward has offered me a job, Leah, as an engineer. Not just any job, Pamela corrected. He would lead our innovation department. Amelia's mouth parted again, but Pamela was already glancing at her watch. That's not why I brought him back just yet. In fact, if you'll both come with me to the field, we should arrive just in time. Still dazed, Charles and Amelia followed Pamela through the trailer park. The open field behind their unit was quiet, save for a few kids playing on the aging swing set and an elderly man walking his dog. Perfect, Pamela murmured, checking her phone. Then it happened. At first, Charles heard it, a low, rhythmic thump that steadily grew louder. Moments later, a sleek black helicopter appeared above the tree line, its body emblazoned with the unmistakable Woodward Technologies logo. Amelia gasped, clinging to her father's arm. Across the park, life froze. Residents paused mid-step, stepping from their homes to gape at the surreal sight. The helicopter dipped lower, circling once before descending onto the grass. Its downdraft scattered paper cups and dust in all directions. What is this? Charles shouted over the roar of the rotors. Pamela's eyes glittered with pride. Your transport to Brighton Heights. I thought a tour might help you decide, and trust me, the view is quite something. The pilot, dressed in a crisp uniform, opened the door and waited. Charles blinked, staring at the helicopter, then back at Pamela, his thoughts reeling. You flew a helicopter to my trailer park? Time is money, Mr. Hartman, she replied coolly. And I believe in leaving a lasting impression. Shall we? It won't take long, she added. You'll be back by dinner. Can I come too? Amelia asked, practically vibrating with excitement. I was counting on it, Pamela said, smiling. Your scholarship packet is ready at the university. I thought we might swing by there first. Charles hesitated, glancing down at his worn clothes and the stares of neighbours. A part of him recoiled. This showy display felt too grand, too manipulative. But then he looked at Amelia, the sparkle in her eyes, the hope, and he remembered the passion of building, of designing, of solving, all the parts of him he'd tucked away to survive. Give us 10 minutes to change, he said finally. Of course, Pamela nodded. The helicopter isn't going anywhere. As they rushed back, whispers followed them like ripples in water. Warren Schmidt, standing outside his garage, stared slack-jawed. One of his mechanics pointed and whispered, explaining exactly who the helicopter had come for. Inside, Amelia was bouncing like a spring. Dad, this is unreal. That summer program, you know how hard it is to get in? They only picked 12 kids. Charles pulled out his one decent shirt, a button-down from a past life that now hung a little loose on his thinner frame. "Slow down, Leah," he said gently. "We haven't decided anything yet." Amelia paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Unless you don't want to go back to engineering." Charles sighed, meeting her gaze. "It's not that simple. Brighton Heights isn't just another job. We'd be starting from scratch. And what if I'm not who they think I am?" Amelia stepped closer, smoothing his collar, just like Sarah used to. "Dad, for 10 years you've given up everything, just to make sure I had a shot. Maybe it's your turn now." Charles felt his throat tighten. When had she grown so wise? "When did you get so smart?" he asked, voice thick. "I had a great teacher." Amelia beamed. "Now come on. There's a helicopter waiting for us. A real helicopter, Dad." Moments later, they walked back to the field, dressed in their best. Charles couldn't deny the satisfaction in seeing the stunned looks on the faces of their neighbours, especially Warren Schmidt, the same man who'd turned him away for being overqualified. Pamela was by the helicopter, finishing a call. She ended it as they approached. "Ready for your tour, Mr. Hartman?" Charles took a breath. "Ready as I'll ever be." As they boarded, Charles caught a glimpse of Benjamin Lopez, standing by his trailer, giving him a thumbs up. For the first time in years, Charles felt something stir inside him, a cautious, flickering sense of hope. A part of him was still bruised, still guarded, but he felt alive. The helicopter lifted off, rising above Woodbury Meadows, above the battered trailer that had been both refuge and cage. From the air, the park looked almost beautiful, like a model town in morning light. One chapter closing, another just beginning. He wasn't sure yet if he would accept Pamela's offer. The scars of betrayal ran deep, but for the first time in a decade he allowed himself to picture something more than just surviving. Beside him, Amelia stared out the window, awe and wonder written across her face. In that moment, all doubts faded. Because regardless of Pamela Woodward's motives, one thing was clear. His daughter was flying, literally and metaphorically, toward a future he'd always dreamed for her. The helicopter banked gently southwest, toward the shining skyline of Brighton Heights. Structures of glass and steel emerged from the horizon, monuments to innovation and ambition. As they descended onto the pristine helipad, the company's sleek campus came into view. Fountains, trimmed hedges, well-dressed employees moving with purpose. Inside the cockpit, Charles swallowed hard, aware of his worn jeans and thrift store shoes. He no longer felt like the confident engineer he once was. "It's impressive, isn't it?" Pamela said, watching him. "We designed it to reflect our values, old materials, new possibilities." Amelia whispered, "It looks like a movie." The pilot opened the door. A tall man in a designer's suit stood waiting, checking his watch impatiently. "Pamela, the board meeting started 15 minutes ago," he barked. Ignoring his tone, Pamela gestured calmly. "Douglas, meet Charles Hartman, our potential new director of innovation, and his daughter, Amelia." The man blinked, recognizing the name. "Hartman, the Davidson engineer who's supposed to solve our thermal regulation crisis." Charles stepped forward, the wind ruffling his shirt. He didn't have all the answers, but he was ready to find them. Ready at last to begin again. Pamela's voice cut gently but decisively through the air, her tone unwavering yet gracious. "Yes," she said. "Please let the board know I'll be there within the hour. I'm currently giving the Hartmans a tour of our facilities." Douglas, standing nearby, paused. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, a silent battle between sticking to protocol and yielding to curiosity. After a moment, he gave a tight nod. "I'll make your excuses," he said at last. "But just so you know, Henderson is out for blood today. He's already raising serious concerns about the increased R&D budget allocated to the Pulse program." Pamela's response came without pause. "Then it's fortunate I found someone who can justify that investment," she said, her eyes shifting toward Charles and Amelia with an unspoken confidence. She turned toward them, her professional mask softening slightly. "Shall we begin the tour?" she asked, her voice smooth. "I believe Jason is waiting for us at the main entrance." As they walked across the sleek helipad, a light breeze catching the hem of Pamela's coat, they approached a gleaming glass walkway suspended above a manicured courtyard. Charles took in the futuristic architecture and couldn't help but ask, Who's Henderson? Pamela chuckled softly, but there was an unmistakable edge in her gaze. A board member, she replied lightly, with a very limited imagination. He values quarterly profits over long-term innovation. Men like him would have us still building gas-guzzling SUVs, pretending climate change doesn't exist. They stepped into the corridor where sunlight filtered through angled skylights, painting golden streaks across the white floors. A young man in a lab coat approached them with an enthusiastic stride. "Miss Woodward, welcome back," he said, clearly thrilled. "Everything's ready for the tour." "Thank you, Jason," Pamela replied, gesturing toward her companions. "This is Mr. Hartman and his daughter, Amelia. Jason is one of our junior engineers. He'll be showing you around the innovation lab while I attend to a few executive matters. I'll rejoin you shortly." With that, Pamela stepped away, disappearing down a side corridor toward the executive wing, her heels echoing against the polished floor. Jason led Charles and Amelia through the security checkpoint, handing them visitor badges with a flourish. "It's a real honor to meet you, Mr. Hartman," he said as they walked. "Ms. Woodward told us about your work on the Pulse prototype. Incredible how you diagnosed that thermal inefficiency with nothing but basic tools." Charles raised an eyebrow. "You knew about the issue?" Jason nodded and lowered his voice slightly, glancing around as if revealing a secret. "Everyone on the engineering team has been struggling with it for months. We were losing efficiency during the power transition phase, but nobody could pinpoint the exact cause. The simulations kept telling us everything was fine." Charles gave a quiet nod. "Sometimes the models miss what only human intuition can feel. You have to get your hands on the system, listen to how it breathes, where it resists. That's where the answers are." Jason's eyes lit up with recognition. "That's exactly what I've been saying. But most of the senior engineers are glued to simulations. They've forgotten what it's like to actually feel an engine running properly." They entered an elevator, which silently lifted them to the 3rd floor. When the doors slid open, Charles stepped into a scene that made his heart stir. An expansive engineering lab alive with purpose. Machines hummed, teams collaborated over prototypes, and the scent of metal and ozone hung in the air. It was a world he once lived for, and it welcomed him back like an old friend. "This is our main innovation space," Jason explained as they walked through. "Right now, we're focused on advancing the Pulse system. Our goal is a 30% efficiency boost with significant cost reduction." Charles wandered over to a partially assembled engine, his fingers itching to interact with it. "May I?" he asked, already reaching. "Of course," Jason said, smiling. "That's the exact model Miss Woodward's daughter was driving, the one you repaired." As Charles ran his hands over the metallic structure, his mind kicked into motion. He began identifying points of stress, noting overlooked design flaws, envisioning tweaks. It felt like slipping back into a language he hadn't spoken in years. Amelia stood beside him, her own sharp eyes scanning the setup. "Dad, look how they've arranged the power management system," she said. "It's similar to what we were talking about for my science project, but they're handling energy transfer differently." Pride blossomed in Charles's chest. "Good observation, Leah. They're optimizing for speed over durability. It makes sense for performance metrics, but it'll lead to wear and tear over time." Jason looked impressed. "That's the exact debate we're having. Performance wants speed, but maintenance is worried about long-term reliability." For the next hour, Charles became a part of the lab. He moved from station to station, engaged in animated discussions, reviewed blueprints, and examined prototypes. One by one, engineers began to gather, drawn by the older man who spoke their language fluently and offered insight with refreshing clarity. When Pamela returned, she found Charles standing by a digital whiteboard, sketching improvements to the thermal regulation system alongside half a dozen captivated engineers. "I see you've made yourself at home," she said with a smile. Charles turned, suddenly a bit embarrassed. "Sorry, I got carried away." "Don't ever apologize for passion, Mr. Hartman," Pamela replied. "That's exactly what we're looking for." She turned to the engineers. "Thank you all for your time. Mr. Hartman hasn't formally accepted our offer yet, but I hope today has made a convincing case." As the group dispersed, Pamela led Charles and Amelia to a quieter corner of the lab. "What do you think so far?" she asked. Charles took a deep breath, considering. "It's impressive, The talent here, the facilities, you've built something extraordinary. But, Pamela prompted gently. He hesitated, then chose honesty. But I've been burned before. At Davidson, I thought I was building something meaningful. Then they took my work, put their name on it, and tossed me aside when I pushed back. Pamela's expression darkened with understanding. I know Davidson's methods. He built his empire on stolen ideas. But I built mine on nurturing talent. My name is on this building. My reputation depends on the integrity of every innovation we release. I don't steal ideas. I invest in the people who create them. Charles studied her closely, searching her face for any trace of deceit. He found none, only conviction. I'd need guarantees, he said finally. Clear ownership of my intellectual property, transparent credit for my work. Absolutely, Pamela said. It's already standard in our contracts, but we can add legal provisions for your peace of mind. Nearby, Amelia had wandered to another workstation and returned, excitement dancing in her eyes. Dad, she said, they have everything I'd need for my project, and Jason told me students in the summer program get full access. Pamela smiled, which brings us to our next stop, Brighton University's engineering department. A short drive later, they arrived on the university campus. In contrast to Woodward's futuristic vibe, Brighton exuded old-world charm. Red brick buildings with towering white columns rose above sprawling green lawns. The engineering building, however, was bold and modern, a testament to innovation. Inside, the air buzzed with intellectual energy. Labs brimmed with equipment and students immersed in research. Professor Helen Mitchell, an elegant woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes behind stylish glasses, greeted them. Miss Woodward, right on schedule. And you must be Amelia and Mr. Hartman, she said warmly. Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice, Helen, Pamela replied. For you, any time, Helen said with a smile. She turned to Amelia. Your application was impressive. Your proposal on alternative fuel systems showed real vision for someone your age. Amelia flushed with pride. Thank you, ma'am. I've arranged a tour and meetings with students in the summer program, Helen continued. Would that be all right? Perfect, Pamela nodded. While you show Amelia around, I'll speak with Mr. Hartman. They stepped into a serene courtyard filled with spring blossoms. The contrast to the sterile lab space was calming. Your daughter is extraordinary, Pamela said, watching Amelia in the distance. Helen doesn't impress easily. She takes after her mother, Charles said softly. Sarah was a biochemist, brilliant. Amelia got her mind from both of us. Pamela nodded, then leaned in. This summer program would open doors for her, doors you've worked hard to keep even slightly ajar. Charles fell silent, emotions tightening in his chest. Why me? He asked finally. You must have other candidates, engineers without 10-year gaps or legal baggage. Pamela looked at him, unwavering. When I took over Woodward Technologies, it was floundering. I turned it around by spotting value others overlooked. You, Mr. Hartman, are insight personified. You saw in minutes what our entire team missed. That gift can't be taught. It can only be discovered. Charles listened, the weight of her words settling heavily. And if I say yes? He asked. First, we'll fix the thermal issues, Pamela replied. Then, you'll lead our innovation team, shaping the future of our technology. Full creative freedom, world-class resources, and she paused, a healthcare plan that would have covered your wife's treatments. An education fund for Amelia that ensures she can attend any university she wants. That last sentence hit him like a punch. If only things had been different. I'd need to wait until Amelia finishes this school year, he said quietly. Of course, Pamela said. We'll arrange temporary housing, and Brighton Heights has excellent schools, though frankly, Amelia may outgrow them quickly. Charles turned to look at the engineering building, where his daughter's future seemed suddenly within reach. I need to talk to her, he said. This affects her life as much as mine. Of course, Pamela agreed. They found Amelia in a lab, surrounded by summer students, her face alight with joy and energy he hadn't seen in years. She spotted him and rushed over, full of hope and questions. And in that moment, Charles Hartman began to believe again, not just in the promise of the future, but in the idea that he and his daughter still had one to claim. With a spark of enthusiasm, Pamela turned to Charles and said, Mr. Hartman, your daughter would be an incredible addition to our program. Her grasp of engineering concepts is unusually advanced for someone her age. It's clear the talent runs in the family. That last sentence struck a quiet chord within Charles. It wasn't the kind of praise he usually heard about fixing engines or unclogging carburetors, but something deeper, something he hadn't dared let himself feel in a long time. He was being recognized not just as a handyman with a wrench, but as the engineer he once was. That part of him, long buried beneath years of sacrifice and survival, stirred awake like a limb slowly coming back to life after being numb for too long. As the meeting wound down, Professor Mitchell handed Amelia a neatly bound packet. "Everything you need to know about the summer program is in here," he explained warmly. "Housing arrangements, the daily schedule, project outlines. We look forward to seeing you in June." On the ride back to the helicopter, Amelia flipped through the pages with growing awe. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, every detail fueling her curiosity. "Dad, look at this!" she exclaimed, holding up the pages. "The facilities are amazing, and there's even a stipend. We wouldn't have to pay anything except for my personal stuff." Charles glanced over at Pamela, who was respectfully giving them space, quietly checking her phone in the corner. Then he spoke in a voice quiet but heavy with thought. "Leah, if we go through with this, if I take the job and you join the summer program, it changes everything. We'll leave Woodbury, your school, your friends." Amelia paused, the excitement momentarily giving way to reflection. She closed the packet and looked up at him, her face more serious than her age should allow. "Dad, what friends?" she asked, her voice soft but sure. "The kids at school either feel sorry for me or make fun of me for living in a trailer, and you." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "You're not happy, Dad. I see it. You work so hard fixing other people's machines when you could be building your own. Ever since Mom died, you've been putting your whole life on pause, for me." The words hit Charles in the chest like a wave. He'd tried so hard to shield her from the weight he carried, to smile through exhaustion, to make a home out of the little they had. "I just wanted to give you a sense of stability," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You did," Amelia assured him, reaching out and taking his hand. "But maybe now we both deserve more. A chance to become who we're really meant to be, not who life forced us to be." Her words echoed in Charles's mind long after the helicopter lifted off again. He looked down at Woodbury as it grew closer, a quilt of familiar roads, tin rooftops and dusty lots. The contrast was stark. Brighton Heights, with its glass buildings and lush lawns, was already fading into memory as the fields and factories of their world came into view. And then, as the helicopter descended over the trailer park's communal field, Charles noticed a crowd had gathered, neighbours, curious faces, and even a van from the local news. He felt strangely detached, like a man watching his life from the outside, finally seeing it in sharp relief. The patterns, the constraints, and now, perhaps, the doorway out. The blades slowed, the dust settled. Pamela turned to Charles one last time. "You don't have to decide today, Mr. Hartman. Take the week, think it through." Charles looked at Amelia. She met his gaze, her eyes brimming with hope. Then he looked back at the crowd, some curious, some supportive, some simply stunned. "I don't need a week," he said firmly. "We accept your offer." Pamela smiled, visibly pleased. "Wonderful. I'll have HR start preparing everything. Welcome to Woodward Technologies." As they stepped out of the helicopter, Charles caught sight of familiar faces. Warren Schmidt, with a puzzled, calculating stare, and Benjamin Lopez, beaming and giving a giant thumbs up. "Looks like the whole neighborhood came to welcome you back," Pamela observed. "Would you like me to stay and make a formal announcement?" Charles shook his head. "No need. News like this spreads faster than fire in Woodbury." Pamela nodded, already understanding. "My assistant will reach out tomorrow to start the onboarding. And Amelia, Professor Mitchell will follow up about your housing next week." Once she left and the helicopter rose back into the sky, Charles and Amelia turned to face their neighbours. A flurry of questions erupted, about the job, about the helicopter, about what came next. "Is it true, Charlie?" Benjamin asked, pushing through the crowd. "You're working for them now?" Charles nodded. "It's true. We're moving to Brighton Heights next month, after Amelia finishes school." Warren stepped forward, his tone unusually subdued. "So, you really were an engineer? Guess I thought you were bluffing when you applied at my shop." I was an engineer, Charles corrected quietly, and I will be again. As the crowd dispersed, Charles and Amelia stepped back into their trailer. It looked different now, no longer a place to hide from the world, but a rest stop before a brand new journey. Amelia threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "We're really doing this," she whispered. Charles held her close, allowing the tightly held hope in his heart to rise, unrestrained. "Yes," he murmured, "it's really happening." Later that night, as Amelia packed her science project to show Miss Foster the next day, Charles stepped outside. The trailer park shimmered in the fading light, bathed in the golden glow of sunset. Even its chipped edges seemed softer now, more noble than broken. He walked to the small garden Amelia had nurtured through all the chaos, kneeling beside it. The soil beneath his fingers felt rich, alive, a symbol of what they'd built despite the odds. From his pocket, Charles pulled out Sarah's wedding ring. He had refused to part with it, even when they'd had nothing left to sell. In the quiet, the gold band caught the last light of the sun, gleaming with memory. "We're going to be okay, Sarah," he whispered. "Better than okay. Amelia's going to have everything we dreamed for her." The ring warmed in his hand, no longer a weight of sorrow, but a connection, a gentle presence. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a blessing. He tucked the ring away and looked toward the horizon, where Brighton heights waited, full of promise. Tomorrow would bring to-do lists, paperwork, and the puzzle of starting fresh. But tonight, just tonight, he let himself feel pure joy. Joy in having survived, in finally moving forward. In the weeks that followed, life became a flurry of change. Charles signed contracts thick with legal terms, boxed up their few belongings, and coordinated with relocation agents. The story of his sudden ascent spread fast in Woodbury. People who had once ignored him were now stopping by with smiles, congratulations, and in some cases thinly veiled agendas. Warren even returned, lingering awkwardly as Charles sorted his tools. "Shame to break up a setup like this," he said, eyeing Charles's perfectly arranged toolbox. "I'm keeping what I need, selling the rest," Charles replied, calm but firm. Warren shifted on his feet. "If I'd known about your background last year when you applied—" "You made a business decision," Charles interrupted. "No hard feelings." Warren sighed with relief. "Well, if you need suppliers for special parts once you're settled, my shop's got connections." Charles gave a polite nod. "I'll keep it in mind." Others, like Benjamin Lopez, showed up for all the right reasons. He even organized a farewell barbecue. Mrs. Peterson brought her famous apple pie. "Who's going to fix my truck now?" she teased. "I've arranged for Michael to take over. He knows your schedule and promised to keep it fair." "Won't be the same," she said, patting his arm. "But I'm proud of you, Charlie. Always knew you were meant for more." Perhaps the most touching farewell came from Miss Foster, Amelia's science teacher. She arrived with a wrapped gift and teary eyes. "I wanted to give you this before you go," she said, handing Amelia the package. Inside was a framed certificate, her state science competition acceptance, alongside a photo of her in the school lab. "I'm going to miss you," she said softly. "You're the most promising student I've taught in 15 years. She turned to Charles. "You've raised a remarkable young woman, Mr. Hartman. Her mother would be proud." Charles swallowed the lump in his throat. She had a great teacher, and they both knew he meant more than just her classroom education. On moving day, their trailer stood hollow and still. Charles paused in the living room, memories rushing in. Amelia doing homework at the kitchen table, the Christmas tree they decorated together with paper stars. And then, with a deep breath, they stepped out into the future. They had scraped together just enough to buy a small tree, one last symbolic gesture of hope before saying goodbye to the life they had built from little more than grit and endurance. Charles had spent countless nights on the pull-out couch, the springs digging into his back as he sat hunched over bills, receipts, and his calculator, trying to stretch their meagre savings just a bit further. Each night was a quiet battle, one fought with numbers and worry, driven by a father's determination to shield his daughter from the harsh edges of poverty. "Dad?" Amelia's soft voice broke the silence, drawing his gaze toward the doorway. She stood there, keys in hand, her expression a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. "Everything's loaded. Are you ready?" Charles took one last look around the place. The modest trailer had been more than just a shelter. It had been their sanctuary through years of struggle. He nodded. Ready. Together, they stepped outside and descended the metal stairs for the final time. Waiting beside a dust-coated pickup truck was Tom Parker, their landlord, a man who had, not long ago, threatened to evict them during a particularly bad month. Now he stood quiet and expectant, ready to collect the keys. Charles extended his hand. "Trailer's in good shape," he said. "Fixed the leaky faucet last week." Parker accepted the keys with a short nod. "Never had a problem with you, Hartman. Paid on time when you could. Kept the place decent." He paused, his gruff tone softening ever so slightly. "Good luck in Brighton Heights. Don't forget where you came from." A flicker of unexpected warmth passed between them. "Not likely," Charles replied. That simple exchange held more sincerity than he had anticipated. A nod of respect forged through hardship. Just as they were about to drive away, Charles noticed someone approaching from the road. A figure he knew all too well. Jason Brooks, the teenager who had often mocked Amelia for living in a trailer park. Charles instinctively stiffened, the protective instinct of a father rising to the surface, even in this final moment. But Jason's demeanor was different. He walked slowly, hands buried in his pockets, posture subdued. He stopped a respectful distance away and looked down at the ground. "Heard you're leaving," he muttered. "Going to that fancy engineering program." Amelia nodded, cautious. "That's right." Jason shifted, clearly struggling with his words. "Just wanted to say, good luck, I guess. You were always the smartest kid in class." The awkward compliment hovered in the air like fragile glass. For a boy who had built his confidence by belittling others, the moment was a quiet surrender. Amelia's face softened slightly as she recognized the weight behind his gesture. "Thanks, Jason," she said simply. "Good luck to you too." It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was something close to closure, a final knot tied on the chapter they were leaving behind. The drive to Brighton Heights took just over 2 hours, but it felt like a journey across lifetimes. Woodbury, with its worn-down streets and humble dreams, faded in the rearview mirror. In its place rose communities of manicured lawns and quiet affluence, culminating in the shining promise of Brighton Heights. Their new home was a temporary apartment near Woodward headquarters, but to Charles and Amelia, it felt like stepping into another world. The apartment was sleek and modern, glass walls from floor to ceiling, stainless steel fixtures gleaming beneath recessed lighting. Every corner whispered of luxury and opportunity. "This is bigger than our whole trailer," Amelia said, eyes wide as she wandered the open-concept living room. "And look at this view." Through the vast windows, Brighton Heights stretched out before them, and in the distance, the Woodward Technologies building glinted in the late afternoon sun, its futuristic curves glowing with possibility. It was stunning, and yet as Charles stood in the center of this polished new reality, he felt a strange pang, a subtle sense of displacement. The shift from survival to abundance was so sudden it made his footing feel unsure. "Dad," Amelia's voice pulled him from his reverie. "Are you okay?" He offered a smile to mask the swirl of emotion within. "Just taking it all in. Quite a change, isn't it?" "The best kind of change," she replied, her voice full of belief, and somehow that anchored him. That night, as Amelia slept peacefully in her new bedroom, her dreams likely filled with the future she'd fought so hard to earn, Charles sat alone on the balcony. A cup of coffee warmed his hands while the city lights of Brighton Heights shimmered in the distance. His phone buzzed with a message from Pamela. "All set for your birthday tomorrow. Car service will pick you up at 8 a.m. The team is eager to have you on board." He replied with a brief acknowledgement and set the phone down. Tomorrow, he would walk back into a world he once believed lost forever. But this time, he carried not just ambition, but years of hard-won wisdom and a heart reshaped by adversity. The anticipation inside him wasn't simple. It was knotted with determination, fatigue, and a fierce resolve to make this second chance count. Not just for himself, for Amelia, for Sarah's memory. The next morning arrived with precision. At exactly 8 a.m., a black luxury sedan appeared and whisked him to the towering headquarters of Woodward Technologies. Inside, a polite HR representative greeted him with a security badge, a company laptop, and a thick stack of onboarding forms. "Ms. Woodward asked that you be taken directly to the Innovation Lab after processing," she explained. She's assembled the Pulse team for introductions. Even in this modern corporate landscape, the familiar rituals, security protocols, benefit enrollments, confidentiality agreements brought a strange comfort to Charles. By 9:30, he found himself walking into the very lab he had visited not long ago, but now as its new director of innovation. The change in how he was received was immediate. Engineers who had previously regarded him with polite curiosity now stood a little straighter, their eyes watching him closely. Among them stood Pamela, confident and composed beside a large display of engine schematics. "Ah, Mr. Hartman. Right on time," she announced. "Everyone, meet Charles Hartman, our new Director of Innovation." He was introduced to each team member: Jason Reynolds, Dr. Elena Vasquez, Mark Thompson, Sophia Chen. Each handshake came with unspoken expectations. Dr. Vasquez's in particular was firm and appraising. "I understand you identified a thermal regulation issue in our prototype," she said, her eyes sharp. "We're curious about your approach. A challenge, not a threat, an opportunity." Charles knew this was his moment. "Perhaps I could walk you through what I observed," he suggested, stepping toward the schematics, "and then hear your thoughts on the current design choices." What followed was a masterclass in leadership. For an hour, Charles facilitated an open, collaborative discussion. He honored the work the team had already done while guiding them gently toward new possibilities. He asked more than he instructed, listening deeply and threading their ideas together. By the end of the session, even Dr. Vasquez looked cautiously impressed. "I propose we break for lunch," Pamela said. "We'll reconvene at 1 to discuss implementation." As the room emptied, a tall man appeared in the doorway. Douglas Webber, the VP of Operations. His handshake was precise, professional, and a touch aloof. "Quite the entrance you've made," he said. "The board is very interested in your progress." "We're just getting started," Charles replied calmly. "The team's incredibly talented. I expect we'll have a solution in weeks, not months." "Bold prediction," Douglas said with a raised eyebrow. "Henderson will be delighted, or skeptical, possibly both." "Charles doesn't need to worry about Henderson," Pamela interjected smoothly. "That's my department. His focus is innovation." Douglas nodded slightly. "Of course, just making sure our new director understands the fiscal realities." "I appreciate the context," Charles responded diplomatically. "In my experience, the best way to satisfy financial concerns is with exceptional engineering." Pamela's approving smile said everything. "Precisely why you're here." At lunch in the executive dining room, surrounded by glass walls and gourmet food, Charles felt the full surreal weight of his transformation. Pamela brought up the restricted Davidson patents. "You'll need access," she told Douglas, "specifically the original ones related to Pulse." Douglas hesitated. "Those are sealed. Legal would have to approve." "Then have legal approve it," Pamela said coolly. Charles, observing the exchange, asked carefully, "May I ask why they're restricted?" Pamela answered with careful wording. "Part of a broader settlement. Davidson had infringed on our patents. In exchange for not pursuing damages, we acquired their hybrid tech." Charles's heart skipped. "The hybrid patents from 2014 to 2015. Pamela nodded. "I thought you might be familiar. The very patents that had once been stolen from him. The theft that had shattered his life. Now they were his again, his to rebuild." "I might have some insights," he said evenly, keeping his voice steady despite the storm inside. Pamela's knowing look told him she understood the weight of what she had just handed back to him. And just like that, he had come full circle. The soft glow of city lights bathed the balcony in a warm hue as Amelia and Charles sat down for dinner, the clink of cutlery blending with the hum of traffic far below. Amelia twirled her fork through the pasta on her plate. Her excitement about the university summer program mingled with a quiet thread of doubt that she could no longer keep hidden. "What if I'm not good enough?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above the gentle clatter of the evening breeze. "What if they realize I don't belong there?" Her eyes dropped to her plate, shoulders tense. "Everyone else probably comes from these elite prep schools, with cutting-edge labs and equipment. I had to build half my experiments from scraps in our trailer." Charles didn't need to ask where the fear was coming from. He recognized it instantly. That same knot of insecurity had twisted in his own chest when he first walked into the high-tech innovation lab at Woodward. But to him, Amelia's past wasn't a weakness. It was her defining strength. "That improvisation," he said, voice steady and full of quiet conviction, "is exactly what sets you apart. Anyone can follow instructions when they have all the tools and unlimited funding. But to find solutions with nothing but what's available, that takes real ingenuity. That's talent, Leah." She paused, considering his words, the doubt in her eyes slowly giving way to reflection. "Like when you fixed Miss Woodward's daughter's car with just your basic toolkit?" she asked, half smiling now. "Exactly," Charles nodded. "Limitations don't stifle innovation. They force it. That's something perfection will never teach you." Amelia exhaled slowly, her posture relaxing as his words settled her thoughts. They continued their dinner, their conversation shifting to more practical matters. Details about her first day, shuttle pickups, the orientation schedule. "The university shuttle will pick us up at 7:30 from Westfield Apartments," she recited from memory, her voice more confident now. "Orientation starts at 8:15, lab tours at 9:30. Charles smiled, impressed. "Sounds like someone's already prepared for takeoff." "I don't want to miss a single thing," she admitted earnestly. "This is my chance to prove that I belong." "You already belong," Charles said firmly, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering belief. "They saw your brilliance before they knew anything about me or my job. Never forget that." When Monday morning arrived, it did so with a clarity that felt almost symbolic. The sky was a flawless canvas, as if the world itself recognized that something important was beginning. Charles helped Amelia load her project materials onto the university shuttle, his heart swelling with pride and a bittersweet pang. She found a seat among a sea of bright-eyed students, each one a symbol of possibility and potential. "Call me when you're done," he reminded her, adjusting her backpack on the seat beside her. "I'll have the company car pick you up." "Dad," she groaned with mock exasperation, rolling her eyes. "I can take the shuttle back. I'm not a kid." "Humor your old man. Just this once," he chuckled. "It's a big milestone." As the shuttle pulled away, he watched her through the window, a quiet ache blooming in his chest. She was growing into her own person now, and while he had protected her through every storm they faced, now he had to step back. Let her become who she was meant to be. The car dropped Charles off at Woodward's headquarters. His second week was already proving more intense than the first. Over the weekend, he'd buried himself in technical schematics, mapping refinements to the pulse system that extended far beyond the immediate thermal regulation issues. When he entered the innovation lab, Dr. Vasquez was already there, hunched over a bench strewn with prototype components. "Early start?" Charles asked, setting down his laptop. "Didn't really leave," she said, gesturing toward a crumpled coffee cup and a chair that had clearly doubled as her makeshift bed. "The fabrication team dropped off the new components at midnight. I wanted a jump start." Charles regarded her with renewed respect. Her initial skepticism had masked a work ethic every bit as relentless as his own once had been. "Find anything useful?" he asked. "The heat distribution patterns matched your predictions," she said, showing him thermal scans. "We've got a 3% improvement in dissipation efficiency." For the next hour, the lab buzzed with energy as more engineers trickled in, reviewing schematics, adjusting wires, refining the prototype. Charles found himself in deep conversation with Mark Thompson about connection tolerances when Pamela appeared at the door, accompanied by a silver-haired man in a sleek suit. The air shifted the moment they stepped inside. "Charles," Pamela called, her voice composed but with an edge. "I'd like you to meet Robert Henderson, one of our board members." Charles immediately recognized the name, the very skeptic Douglas had warned him about. This was the man scrutinizing R&D expenditures. He approached with polite confidence, offering his hand. "Mr. Henderson," Charles said evenly, "a pleasure." The handshake was firm but brisk. Henderson's sharp gaze lingered a beat too long. "So you're the miracle worker," he said. "The mechanic who solved our thermal regulation problem overnight." Charles noted the slight stress on mechanic but didn't flinch. "No miracles, sir," he replied calmly. "Just engineering, applied under pressure." Pamela gave a neutral smile. "Robert's in town for a few days. He wanted to see our progress firsthand." Given the budget increase last quarter, Henderson added, the board is eager to see results. Charles nodded. The game was clear. Pamela defending her department's funding, Henderson quietly evaluating its merit, and himself, the wild card in the middle. Let me show you what we've accomplished, Charles offered, guiding them toward Dr. Vasquez. For 30 minutes, Charles walked them through the prototype, explaining the modifications, the projected gains, the cost-to-benefit ratios. Henderson listened attentively, asking questions that betrayed a surprising technical grasp. You adjusted the connection architecture rather than redesigning the whole component, Henderson noted. Smart, less disruption on the production line. That was the goal, Charles agreed. Optimize without rebuilding. And the alternative electrical routing? Henderson asked. A team effort, Charles clarified, motioning toward Dr. Vasquez. She identified the most efficient path once we dialed in the new thermal specs. A flicker of something. Approval, perhaps, crossed Henderson's face. He turned to Pamela. Initial impressions are positive. If these efficiencies hold through production, the investment was well worth it. Pamela kept her expression professional, but Charles caught the subtle pride in her eyes. Shall we leave the team to work while we discuss quarterly forecasts over lunch? She offered. As they turned to go, Henderson glanced back at Charles. Sounds like Davidson's loss is Woodward's gain, Mr. Hartman. I'm curious to see what else you've got in store. The comment caught Charles off guard. Henderson knew about Davidson Automotive, about his past. That complicated things. Back at his station, Charles was still processing the interaction when Jason approached. Mr. Hartman, there's someone from the university on line 3. It's about your daughter. A ripple of alarm surged through him. He reached for the phone instantly. This is Charles Hartman. Mr. Hartman, this is Professor Mitchell from Brighton University, a warm, calm voice replied. No cause for worry. Quite the opposite, actually. I wanted to inform you that Amelia's project presentation this morning made quite an impression. Charles let out a breath. Her concept on fuel efficiency caught the attention of our department chair. He's requested a special demo tomorrow for visiting industry partners. It's really exceptional. As Mitchell explained more, pride swelled in Charles's chest. Amelia had built the project with nothing more than leftover parts and pure determination in a trailer, and now it was being seen as having real-world potential. She's methodical, creative, and incredibly articulate, the professor concluded. You should be very proud. I am, Charles said, voice thick with emotion. Thank you for calling. He sat there a moment after the call ended, stunned. In just weeks, both he and Amelia had gone from scraping by to being recognized in their respective fields. The shift was so sudden it felt surreal. The afternoon flew by. Positive results streamed in from prototype testing. It wasn't until his phone buzzed that he realized it was evening. Text from Amelia. Done with first day. Taking shuttle back. So much to tell you. He quickly packed up, waved goodbye to his team and advised them not to work too late. Sometimes a fresh brain in the morning solves what caffeine at midnight can't, he said with a smile. By the time he got home, the shuttle was just pulling in. Amelia spotted him and bounded over, glowing with energy and joy. Dad, you won't believe what happened. Try me, he grinned, already knowing but eager to hear it from her. Over dinner, Amelia spilled every detail, the sprawling labs, the genius students, and most of all, how her project had caught the attention of multiple professors. He actually stopped mid-lecture to talk about my design, she said, eyes wide. He called it elegant and practical. Charles listened, heart full. That's incredible, Leah. And tomorrow, she said, nearly vibrating, I'm presenting to actual industry people. They think it could help in places where high-tech solutions just aren't feasible. Charles smiled softly. Elegance through constraint, he murmured. Like father, like daughter. What? Nothing, he said, beaming. Just proud of you. Later, while Amelia revised her materials, Charles stepped onto the balcony with a coffee, looking out at a skyline that still didn't feel quite like home. He thought briefly of Woodbury Meadows, not with longing, but with gratitude for the fire it had forged in them. His phone rang. Pamela, hope I'm not interrupting? Not at all, he replied. I just wanted to say, your presentation today, it made a real impression on Henderson. Charles blinked. He seemed satisfied. More than that, he's recommending we accelerate development and boost your department's budget. Charles paused, surprised. That's unexpected, given his cautious reputation. He doesn't fear spending, Pamela explained. He fears waste. You proved the value. She hesitated, then continued, voice quieter. He also mentioned your past with Davidson. Charles tensed. In what way? He was on their board during the patent scandal. He resigned after that, said it didn't sit right with him. The revelation struck a chord. Henderson wasn't just evaluating him. He might have been rooting for him all along. Why didn't you tell me? I only found out this afternoon. Charles stood in the quiet night, heart full and mind racing. Their lives were changing, and finally, it felt like the world was opening its arms instead of closing its doors.